Britain owes the migrants that come here nothing. And I say this categorically. We do not owe them anything. Now, Nesreen Malik, an author for a columnist for The Guardian, of course disagrees, and we're going to go through her article, because it's very interesting how her article actually blows up the idea that we do owe the immigrants everything, or anything, and she doesn't seem to understand it. And of course there's an argument contained in here that is just such preposterous nonsense, I couldn't resist it. Couldn't leave it alone. I saw it and I was like, all right, Nesreen, put that on the list.
I mean, Nesreen Malik's my favourite leftist. So
yes, she's mental. But the thing is, as well, there's a genuine desperation that underpins this article as well, because the arguments are not necessarily new; they're just becoming more explicit. She's like, look, a mask fully off. You don't own your country. I own your country. It's like, do you? Doesn't feel like you do. But anyway, she says, where we're born is sheer luck, yet our national delusion of meritocracy lets people shrug when others die in the channel. No, it's not. It's not sheer luck, as if there was some god rolling dice and then be like, okay, you're born in, America, you're born in Australia, you're born in the Congo. No, where you're born is inevitable. It is a direct, linear consequence of the product of your parents mating, Nesreen. It's literally beyond your choice and no chances involved at all. It is guaranteed that you will be born to your parents. Yeah. I don't know how else to describe that.
I mean, we were talking about this before we started, but there's this, I can't remember the origin, but this left-wing view that, we'll think about if you were floating above the
it comes
earth.
from John Rawls. This is his veil of ignorance theory.
Yeah, what country would you like to be born in, and therefore we'll build a country like this?
Exactly.
But you have to believe in some kind of like Hindu rebirth, where you're could be born anywhere and you just happen to end up in a place. It's like, no, you literally come from your parents having sex.
The idea, though, is that you assume you're born in the worst possible condition. But if, say, 10% of the society was slaves, you'd be like, I've got a 9 in 10 chance of not being a slave. So I'm going to go for that society. Oh, roll the dice, I've got a 7. Great, I'm not a slave. And now I just live on top of this slave caste. Well done, John. But anyway,
but also, no dice are being rolled.
Yeah, no, obviously, this is total nonsense thought experiment from John Rawls. It's nonsense. But anyway, she carries on. How much are you worth? I don't mean what is the sum of your financial assets. I mean as a human. If you had to come up with some formula to determine what your value is, how would you go about it? If that is too difficult, let me rephrase the question to make it more specific. Who values you? Who knows, loves, and cares for you? Who seeks your company, who would miss it, and whose lives would be poorer for it in your absence? This is great framing. Let's carry on. The answer is probably everyone whose relationship to you is not transactional. Put a pin in that and think about that in a minute. Whose affection for you is unconditional, for whom you are unique and irreplaceable. All other roles we have as employees, consumers, taxpayers are impersonal. We don't think of ourselves as units whose value is derived from making a measurable contribution to the economy. We do not wake up in the morning and congratulate ourselves for contributing to our country's GDP. So this is the deeply conservative framing.
Yeah.
Right, this is unbelievably conservative. She's a communist, so it's remarkable that this framing comes out of her mouth, right? That's fantastic. Let's carry on. Similarly, if we fall on hard times, we do not personally berate ourselves for being a net drag on the economy. Maybe we should start doing that. Our sense of self is not shaped by calculations of what we put in and what we take out from some common pot of goods and services by other people and for the rich and enriching relationships we form around them. Fantastic frame, right? If we don't have a personal relationship with someone, we don't value them. Why would I care about migrants who died in the Channel? I do not have a personal relationship with them. I don't value them. I don't care. It's not my problem. Now, obviously, in an abstract way, I'm sympathetic to someone dying in an accident.
Well, it's not a famine, right? Because if there's a famine in X country where people can't help it and they're dying, you could say that, well, we could help and therefore we probably should. Yeah. Well, if grown adults get on some dinghies and kill themselves, well, whose fault is that?
Exactly. And also when they're committing a crime, as in they're trying to break into someone's country. If a burglar killed himself trying to break into my house, I'm not going to be like, oh no, the poor burglar. Why would I be? But the point is, as she says, we don't have any kind of relationship with the people on the other side of the world. We don't have any connections of sentiment between them, especially as many of them don't really like our country anyway, and are just here for the economic calculations she is decrying. So why would I care about this at all? Fantastic framing from Nesreen here. She carries on. Our entire immigration system and its approach towards outsiders is based on reversing this definition of worth. People who are trying to enter the UK are not valued for this sort of humanity, but instead regarded as dud units of economic drag. Why might that be, Nesreen? It's because we don't have that kind of relationship with them. We don't care about them at all. They're not ours. They're someone else's, from somewhere else in the world.
By definition.
Exactly, by her own definition, in fact, right? And this is a great point. Because we have no relationship to these foreigners, okay, well, they're going to come here. What do we need to do? We need to figure out why it's acceptable for them to come here. Well, there has to be some economic benefit to us.
Because there is no relationship benefit.
Exactly. So we're reduced to making an economic calculation in self-interest to try and justify why this is being done to us. Because otherwise, we have blown up the pro-immigration immigration argument entirely. It's gone. She's right. There's no reason we should accept any of these people, her included. She's an immigrant too.
I mean, we've covered previously her background. Like, she was born and raised in North Sudan and would look down on the South Sudanese as being black and therefore inferior, in her own words, and therefore would use the N-word to describe them. And then she moved to Saudi Arabia with her family, and the Arabs called her the N-word, and then she thought, yeah, racism is bad. It's like, brainlet. Absolute brainlet.
And so it's just very interesting how she has totally demolished the pro-immigration argument from an immigrant herself. That's fantastic. She carries on. Their entry to this country becomes a matter of what they will take out and consume, what resources they will take away from the rest of us, and even how their cultural influences will dilute and compromise our own. Yeah, because that's the contribution they're making. We don't know who they are. They're not enriching our lives as friends and relatives and loved ones and things, because they're not. They're foreigners. We don't know them. They're strangers. And so we have to make a materialistic calculation, because that's all we're left with. When they drown trying to make it to our shores, we don't blame their deaths on the fact that we have not set up safe routes, forcing them to carry their children in inflatable toys across the channel. We instead enforce the cruel logic of borders and entitlement. I think I might be entitled to live in the country in which I was born. They're entitled to live in the country in which they're born. But there's some irresistible force that's shoving them onto a boat. Probably the money they pay people traffickers.
Well, also, they're entitled to go to the first safe country.
That's actually not true.
Well, legally, they're entitled.
No, that's actually not true. I looked this up. And
really?
Yeah, there'll be a segment about it on the weekend. It's actually not true. The Geneva Convention on this doesn't have any specification of where they're supposed to stop. However, British law does say that if we think they're coming from a safe country, aka France, we can say no. So we actually, for ourselves, have a little out on that. The rest of the world, I don't care. Why don't they write their own laws that say no, go away? Well, but they're free to, frankly.
Foreign law, who cares about it?
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. We don't have a relationship to it, not our problem. But the point is, look at this. The cruel logic of borders and entitlement. As if we're obligated to take anyone. As if anyone has a right to be here, right? We're not obligated to take a single foreigner anywhere in the world, right? You have no right to be here either. We don't control your countries and you don't own our land. It's not our problem. And that, frankly, this is deeply imperial thinking, I think, where she's like, well, Britain is obligated to help the people of Africa. It's like, why? Something about empire, surely. But you wanted independence. Independence means not connected to us. Independence means we don't have to do anything for you. And as she points out, the migrants are indeed a burden on Britain. They cost us money.
There is also a factual lie there. That she says there's no safe routes.
Oh, there are loads. Yeah.
How did all the asylum seekers we have in this country get here then?
Well, exactly.
They all come on the boats? Of course they didn't.
No, but these people are coming illegally. But she does point out that, yeah, they damage the cultural fabric, they cost us money, and then people like her will complain when we don't simply abandon all pretenses of having borders in the first place. We're an island. Like, our borders are imposed on us. We don't have a choice about the borders, really. But anyway, we don't set up safe routes to illegal immigration because it's not meant to be happening. These people are criminals. That's why it's illegal. Like I said, if a burglar was trying to break into my home and died, I wouldn't have that much of a problem. But she carries on. There has to be a system, you see. Those who are coming here merely to exercise needs, no matter how urgent those needs are, rather than contribute something, should be kept out. Yeah. Same with people in your own home. The homeless person outside has a need, but you don't just let him in your house and sleep in your bed, do you?
But he's entitled to your home and your house.
By her logic, how could she ever refuse someone? A place in the UK and a high value of life apportioned within this country has to be earned rather than given away like alms to whoever asks. Based. Yes, I agree. That's exactly right. If we're going to let foreigners in, it should be earned. I totally agree. This is what independence looks like. You can't just ask the Brits to solve all of the world's problems. But anyway, she carries on. Here I ask you another question. Have you earned that place? Did you at any point have to go through a series of obstacles, near-death experiences, homelessness, and loyalty tests to win your place at the top of the human food chain? Britain is the top of the human food chain.
I mean, thank you.
Yeah, like literally Shangri-La.
But also, yes, actually, my ancestors did have to go through hell to build the civilization up from the dirt that everyone else had. And then my parents had sex and produced me.
Yeah. So
that's what happens there. It's not that, we just magically were born with this island. It was here, time immemorial in the state it is currently. I mean, you have to believe that the society of the world started when you were born, if you think that.
I mean, that is A, her position, but B, it's also hilarious listening to the Romans talk about Britain. Like the Romans talking about Britain, it's the worst island, it's got the dumbest people, there's nothing there.
Poverty, famine.
Yeah. They go and sit in swamps and laugh at us until we go away. Like that's literally, that's one. I'm not even joking. Apparently the Celts used to sit in swamps up to their necks and just be like, come and get us.
Sounds like fun.
There's a brilliant North FC meme about it. I'll find it sometime for you. But anyway.
Who are you?
But the point is, Nesreen, I didn't have to do any of these things because I was born here. That's it.
Well, my ancestors suffered to make it.
Yeah, exactly. But even wait, who cares? I don't have to justify myself. I was born here. I don't need to do that. In the same way that someone born in wherever else in the rest of the world could say the same. Well, I could say, did you, have to travel across all these deserts and whatnot to get to live in Iran? No, I was born here. Why would I have to do that? Of course not. That's a ridiculous and redundant question, right? And again, it's the same way that, if I wanted to move to Japan, I would have to justify why I would want to be able to live in Japan. And the Japanese would totally be entitled to say, no, this is our country. You didn't have any part in building it up.
Yeah.
No, did your ancestors. You've got no claim to our land at all. But anyway. And really, what kind of person sits there and goes, right, okay, I'm not going to show you any consideration. I'm going to act like I'm entitled to live in your country, and you got to let me in. What kind of person does that?
Well, you remember, we did a clip. There was some refugee who's a photojournalist in France who was just like, they didn't give me the visa. Let me in. I want to come legally. And it's like, but you're fine in France.
Yeah.
You have status in France.
Yes.
No.
Go away. But anyway, she carries on. The truth is that nobody wins their place in the UK. For most people, it is a result of luck and circumstance, and they have no more right to ownership of it than the people risking their lives to get here. She just says it. The British do not own Britain. That's her opinion. You've got no right to your country and the piece of land you live on, no right to it whatsoever.
I saw John making a very valid point as well. She's also arguing that these complete randos who have done nothing have as much entitlement.
We will get to that. She makes that explicit.
Right.
That's not just implicit. She gets to it. It's totally explicit, right? But what a ridiculous statement, right? Britain is the hereditary right, the inheritance of Britain is hereditary right of the British people. You wouldn't say to an Indian son that he's got no right to his father's inheritance. Why would you say that?
I mean, we did once.
Well, yeah, and that was called imperialism, and that was called bad. But the thing is, what would be the criteria for earning it? What would be that criteria? What would you require? Having defended this territory as a sovereign people for 1,000 years? Because actually we meet that criteria, Nesreen.
And the Indians didn't.
Yeah, exactly. We actually meet that criteria and you don't. But yeah, the work that went into making Britain has been done, and not by foreign chancers. That's the thing. She says, if anything, those people are working hard for that place rather than simply being born into it. So the people who didn't get born in Britain, but are working hard by trying to sneak across the border, they're actually the rightful owners of Britain. It's literally what she's saying here. Borders aren't accidents, but being born within them is an accident. Your entire life is an accident. A random luck of the draw.
Look, I know you were an accident by your parents, but the rest of us weren't.
Yeah. You do not deserve to be here any more than anyone else deserves not to be here. You do not deserve to live in Britain.
Says this Sudanese migrant.
Says the foreigner. Unbelievable, isn't it? Right? People this means that people who aren't from Britain have done more for Britain than the people who put their blood, sweat, and tears building up. The people who defended the borders, the people who made and built everything that we have. The foreigners did more for Britain than those people. It's a bizarro leap of logic. And this is where it totally belies the desperation that underpins the argument. If she's like foreigners have done more for your country than the people living in your country, that's absurd.
They're not here. How could
exactly. It's just ridiculous.
They have zero relationships with a single person in this land. So how have they done more than the people living in the land?
How could they have done that by not being here? Like physically.
So how does astral projection?
Yeah, exactly. We use our psychic powers to build these buildings.
Mr. Trump, take my energy.
Exactly. It's Unbelievable, right? And so, and again, it's not accidental that we're here. It's actually inevitable because that's how ancestry works. But the thing is, what she's proposing is the total dispossession of Britain from the British people. And this is a direct contravention of a 1960 UN resolution called 1514, which we can get up now, in fact, that says in point 2, you can get it, John, all peoples have the right to self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. And point 6, any attempt aimed at the partial or total disruption of the national unity and the territorial integrity of a country is incompatible with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. So she's trying to destroy the current international order.
Yeah.
Not very progressive, I would say. In fact, I call it monstrous. And so anyway, returning to the article, let's carry on with the monstrous thing that Malik is trying to do here. She says, these are obvious, almost banal observations. Are they?
It's obvious that people with no relationship to X land have done more for that country than anyone else.
I'm literally going to rock up in Greece and be like, so, I built that Parthenon.
And that's obvious.
Yeah, it's a banal observation, but many will resist them. Even if they acknowledge their truth, many will feel an urge to argue against them.
I wonder why. I wonder why the people who built the Parthenon and their ancestors feel like they have more entitled to that and Greece than the random Turks who just turned up.
I don't know. I mean, I would suggest that this is actually not an obvious banal observation, but in fact in total defiance of common sense, national traditions, hereditary relations, international law, and the common decency of mankind.
And anti-imperialism.
Yes. She carries on. That is because two large political constructions have dominated our way of thinking for so long, presented as facts and not choices. These accidental borders must be enforced as strictly as possible, and we as individuals in free market societies are the sole architects of our own prosperity. Bit of a straw man there, but the borders aren't accidental. We've had to defend them for millennia against foreign invaders. And now we're going to launch an assault on free enterprise and property ownership.
Love the chat. It's just like, we built the pyramids and sheets.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. That's literally what she's saying. You know, we built the British Museum. Well, maybe they did do that. But thank you for the mask coming off and the communist subversion that underpins this finally coming out. She says, if you become convinced that you won your place on this earth through hard graft, then you are more likely to support policies and economic ideologies that facilitate the hoarding of resources. Translation, if you worked hard for what you have, you're more likely to oppose politics that would steal those things from you.
Yes.
Yeah, obviously.
I mean, do you remember the leftist MPs were like, this is vaccine apartheid? Britain paid for the vaccines and got them. Africa didn't pay for them and didn't get them.
Britain isn't entitled to those vaccines. We're entitled to those vaccines. We made those vaccines. Hand them over.
It was like, yeah, but you literally didn't make them, nor did you pay for them, Nigeria. I'm sorry. But if you pay for them, then you'll get them.
But this is amazing. I love this so much. It is harder to part with what you have when you believe that those who are in need of it had the same shot as you but simply didn't pull their weight. I'm not parting with what I have because some foreigners want it. It's mine. Why would you even make this argument? Like, this communist is literally telling you that they plan on stealing what you have and giving it to foreign criminals who are illegally invading the country. The absolute brass balls on this woman, I swear to God.
I told you, she's my favourite leftist.
But again, the wild desperation that underpins this. The idea that, like, I'd literally burst into Malik's house and be like, listen, I own this now because I'm in need of it. You didn't earn this. This was just luck of fortune. I'm taking your television. It's like, wow, that's a great point. You know?
Is the remote.
Yeah, exactly. It's wild, isn't it? So anyway, she carries on. Britain has made national sport of condemning immigrants, single mothers, people on benefits. An entire cast of characters who dared be born in need. Single mothers are born in need, aren't they? I don't think you're born a single mother. I don't think you're born on benefits. Like, just round them all up. Oh, and the immigrants. Every immigrant as well as in need.
They're born immigrants.
Yes.
How does that work?
Don't know. But they dared to be born in need. Again, as if them being born is their choice.
What the fuck does that mean? Like, you're
nonsense.
born native to wherever you're born.
Yes, and you're not born as a single mother either. They support a national delusion of perfect meritocracy, of deserves and deserve nots, which in turn sustains our closed borders, purses and hearts. Based, yes, there is definitely view of people who deserve and people who don't deserve, because people have agency and can make choices, and those choices matter. That's where morality comes from, incidentally, Nezreen. If you don't get to make a choice, it's not moral. But the thing is, again, the straw man misframing. Who said it was a perfect meritocracy? No one said it was perfect. Meritocracy is an aspirational goal that is something to be forever striven towards, and that's what made this country what it is. And it's why you foreigners are so desperate to come here, frankly. And if you took this aspirational meritocratic approach to your own countries, and there are lots of foreign countries that do.
Such as Sudan could use some of it.
Sudan isn't one of those countries, but they could use it. Absolutely, they could use it. Then perhaps they wouldn't be so poorly run and you wouldn't be so eager to flee. But she carries on. This is why people shrug and move on when others die in cold wars of the Channel. Yeah. This is why nothing changes. Yeah. Because we don't want it to change. This is good. This is why we fail to understand how our entire history as a species, it's the royal, universal we now, Don't you realise, well, I mean, you know, you, a Sudanese woman, an Eskimo, what's the difference? None.
Entitled to the same things.
Yeah, aren't you all entitled to the ice of that man's ice pick? You know? How have I suddenly gained a claim on the Eskimos? Like, that's a nice fish you've just fished out there, but it's mine now.
Queen and country.
Yeah, exactly. It's deeply imperial. But this is why we fail to understand our history as a species has been shaped by the inevitability and necessity of the movement of people. Is it inevitable? And is it necessary? Because like the population of Britain has been static for literally tens of thousands of years. It's like really weird how like you can trace the genes back to the Ice Age, right? And I love the inevitable movement of people. Well, it's not inevitable if we just say no. We just stop you coming.
Do you know there's an inevitable movement of people from North Korea to South Korea?
Is there?
No, there's not. There's a DMZ.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it guarded?
Yes.
This is obviously pure communist subversion, beating on the gates, demanding to be let in because they say that it's inevitable that we will capitulate. But we don't have to capitulate. We can just continue saying no. But anyway, she finishes with, the only thing that is not an accident is if you go back far enough, everyone is born somewhere because someone in their lineage at some point deliberately moved to find a safer place for their progeny. They gave their descendants better odds. The only decent thing to do is spread those winnings around. If you don't let us illegals in to steal everything you've got, you're not being decent. It's not decent. But I like, again...
Everyone's an immigrant narrative.
At some point, they moved to find a safer place for their progeny. Yes, and defended that.
Yeah.
For thousands of years. And so we should continue defending what we have for thousands more years.
There's that hunter-gatherer thing, and then the rest of us, Nezreen, did like the farming thing, and then settled the land that we were living in.
But she's just undermined her whole point.
But she's like, no, we're still all hunter-gatherers. We're all just traveling anywhere to get things.
They gave their descendants better odds, as we should give our descendants better odds. And this is a perpetuation of a civilization that works. Or you could open the gates and let the communists in. I have to say, I find this totally unconvincing. Go and fix your own countries. But there was this one article that I saw in Vox that was just amazing. I didn't even bother reading it. I just looked at the title. It was like, thank you, communist subverter. It's time to stop demonizing invasive species because climate change is forcing some animals to move. Don't call them invasives. They are going to apply this exact argument to immigrants. In fact, they are applying this exact argument to immigrants, which is why suddenly, you know, the red squirrels being driven to extinction, it's not because of the invasive grey squirrels. You know, it's climate change. But anyway, no, Nezreen, go back to Sudan.
I would like to add the last point because I don't think we got to it, which was John's point that she's essentially arguing as well the randos who come over with no claim, no relationship whatsoever to Britain or the land have just as much right, not only as the people already living in Britain, but say like, as John gave an example of like his father who served the British police or army for like 15 years?
Oh,
army for 15 years. Like
someone who actually won their place through service.
You see how they have a relationship with Britain through 15 years of military service to Britain?
And what did he get as a reward? Oh, citizenship and settlement in Britain.
But, you know, there's that photojournalist in France who's like, let me in, I want visa.
Honestly, so that was just the worst article. I had to go through it.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site.
We've got loads on there and it's all really, really good. For example, we have regular premium articles that discuss contemporary events and we have an audio track for our silver and gold tier members. And of course, we have our regular series on there. We've got Contemplations, which is Josh and whoever he wants to have talk to him about a particular topic. On this one, he's talking to Bo, about in-group preference. Moving on. Bo and myself also do the Epoch series, which says talking about history. This one's Belisarius Part 3, because Belisarius was a 6th century Byzantine general, and he had an amazing career and a genuinely tragic end. And the myth of him is old blind Belisarius begging on the streets of Rome would have been better than what happened to him, but I won't spoil it. I'll let you I'll let you find out. And of course, we do our regular book club as well this week's or this month's. I don't know how often we do them actually. Fairly regularly. It takes a while to read a book. But this is Callum doing John Stuart Mill's On Liberty, in which I rail against utilitarianism. I used to be a huge fan of John Stuart Mill, like 5-10 years ago. And since then, I've really soured on utilitarianism. And so the framing of his arguments, I find kind of insufferable. He's not wrong in what he's arguing for, but it's the way he's doing it. But anyway, we also do a bunch of premium podcasts, things that are entertaining, we think, like the politics of Star Trek that I did with John, talking about, well, is Star Trek a socialist paradise or not? It turns out it's not, but it's, it's something different. Post-scarcity liberalism, basically. But that's a really good podcast. And we also have to put up things on the website that we can't actually put on YouTube because YouTube has editorial policies about things such as where all these heart attacks are coming from. Giant elephant in the room. It's probably climate change. Don't worry about it. We also have fascinating interviews from really interesting people, such as this one, which is an activist called Luke Avery, who's a Christian, but don't worry, he's not Bible thumping in this. What he's doing is talking about the ancient wisdom in the biblical book of Proverbs, and it's very much daddish sort of stuff, and I really enjoyed doing this one. And I think I'll have him back in, hopefully, to do another one, Ecclesiastes or something, and hopefully we'll do another one soon.
And if you want to keep up with us, you can follow us on getter.com. I love the phrase and getter doing, something like that, I don't know.
You're doing really well on there, though, aren't you? You've got like 11,000 followers.
So come follow me on Getter, come follow you on Getter.
Yeah. And lotus.com on Getter.
Lotus_com on there. Let's go check that out. And also the conference itself. So this is a conference being put on by the Getter guys. This is on the December the 8th. So update on this, the Getter conference has been postponed until further notice. We will let people know as soon as we have more information. Apparently it was postponed thanks to the global freakout in response to the Omicron variant. So sorry about that. So if you'd like to get access to all that premium content, you can subscribe at lotuseaters.com. Thank you and goodbye.